Welcome back to the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Today we're kicking it off with The Veil. It's a new limited series on Hulu. Stars Elisabeth Moss. Was created by the guy who did Peaky Blinders.
Stephen Knight.
That movie still has to come out later this year.
I think they're filming it later this year.
I thought it was supposed to come out years ago. I just don't understand what's taken them so long, besides maybe Oppenheimer.
Well, this was announced back in 2022 of August.
The Veil?
So, yeah. And then he reached out to Elisabeth Moss right after she got done filming season 5 of The Handmaid's Tale. And in between that time, they decided to shoot this thing in 2023.
Now, I've watched 3 episodes of The Veil: The Camp, Crossing the Bridge, and The Asset.
That's half the series.
Yeah. That's half the series, yeah. What do you know about it?
So far, just that it's about an MI6 agent who doesn't play by the rules.
Yes.
And then I think she's helping an ISIS person. It sounds a lot like Hijack with Idris Elba last year.
Well, yeah, I was going to compare it to Hijack. I'll also compare it to Special Ops Lioness because it's a similar scenario where you have an elite group that is going in and trying to infiltrate one of the people who is either close to ISIS or an actual ISIS leader. The difference here is that it really is just 2 main characters. You have the person who plays Adila El-Idrisi, and you have Imogen, who is Elisabeth Moss. I will point out that for Elisabeth Moss, this is a departure from what I'm used to seeing her in Handmaid's Tale, The Invisible Man, Shining Girls. They all have in relation that she plays a victim to start out. Kirby offered Cecilia, and then she tunes it up and grows as a person, and then she defeats the antagonist by the end. At least with Handmaid's Tale, I think that's where it's going to go. I haven't seen the last couple seasons.
Usually she gets some plot armor too, right?
In this, though, it feels like she didn't want to play a victim anymore. And so she's kind of a superhero in a world where there are no superheroes. Mm-hmm. She's playing an elite agent, kind of James Bond-ish, but she's doing a hard time selling it because she's just so narcissistic and smug, snarky, and she's, again, aiding a terrorist. And I don't feel good when I'm watching those scenes because, A, there's a lot of plot holes going down, like how is the terrorist communicating with a lot of her friends? And at this point, we do know, in the first 2 episodes, it was not exactly clear whether Adila El-Idrisi was the main ISIS commander. There was a question whether or not, because, but by the 3rd episode, it's pretty clear that Imogen is, yes, indeed choosing to help a terrorist escape with her daughter after that person has probably done a lot of atrocities.
Now, usually a show like that will save the confirmation or something like that for the penultimate episode. It does seem like they're kind of giving it that way a little early. Is there still any question?
One of my biggest problems with the show is that in the first scenes, you have Adila El-Idrisi. She is recognized in Turkey in a beautiful landscape where they're filming this thing.
They shot in Paris and Turkey, and yeah.
Yes, but this is the snowy Alps. And we do get returned there in the 3rd episode when the UN people are assassinated. But in the 1st episode, she's recognized, and the refugees almost hang her. And since then, I've wondered to myself, what would have been so bad if they had? First of all, a terrorist would be dead. Secondly, I don't even think this plan that is about to happen in America, where they're sending a boat with a bomb on it to kill people, would happen if she had died. Because part of the reason why it kept going is because she was able to hide her phone after she survived the hanging, and Imogen took her away from Syria. And then some other agent one of the ISIS agents was able to find her phone and then contact the people who needed to be contacted so that the plan could go forth. Had she died and they'd taken her phone there at the UN, then I don't think any of it would have happened. So far, I'm still under the my biggest con for it being, why should we want Imogen to help this lady?
Right, yeah, no, and that's the main thing of the show, right? When you're saying that she's helping an ISIS person, though, is she supposed to be the protagonist? She's supposed to stop these terrorists, I assume?
She doesn't know exactly what the plan is. Right now...
Wait, so Imogen, who is helping this ISIS person, doesn't know what the plan is to stop them?
Yeah, Imogen came in cold, literally, because she went up to the mountains, and she helped this person survive the refugee attack, the second one. She drove her into, I forgot where it was. They went from Syria, and then in episode 2, I think they went to Turkey, and then they were able to escape Turkey because they got fake passports. But in order to earn the fake passports, Adila had to sing, And then they made their way into Paris, and we see in this episode they're in Charles de Gaulle Airport, and they get through, and immediately Elisabeth Moss says, you know what? Go ahead and hang out with your daughter for the day. I'm going to go have sex with this French guy. So that's what she does for the third episode, is she goes and hangs out with the French commander guy, and then she's like, I can find Adila at any time. She then goes to a cemetery where they meet, and after that a bar, and it just becomes so convoluted, where the best scene of the whole thing so far has been in episode 3, when you see these two dudes who work for ISIS sacrificing their lives to take out radiation stuff from a cancer treatment and immediately dying from it. Like they give up their own lives, and they get sick as soon as they put the radioactive treatment into the water and then close the lid. And then that, I guess, is being moved to the US. It's crazy, but at the same time, the show itself, pretty terrible. Just logistically,
terrible.
It doesn't make sense. I don't understand how people are getting where they're going. I don't understand how the terrorists were able to communicate with Adila in the second episode when she left them a map to find her phone, or how the phones are able to survive some incredible environments without ever being destroyed. And yet Imogen's phone, when it falls into water in the second episode, goes dead immediately.
Well, one of the things I have to ask is Elisabeth Moss. She has an accent in this, right? Does the accent work? Does the accent work?
It sounds fine.
Okay, so that's because I remember, like, with a lot of different shows, Inventing Anna, the dropout, sometimes that can get annoying. Secondly, though, is how is the action?
She does pick up a southern accent in the third episode, where she stands on a table to embarrass the French guy that she's working with, and says to the entire restaurant that he asked to marry her, just so that they could kind of get a little winky moment there. Like, there was no purpose to that scene other than her just being cocky again.
That sounds like it's supposed to be funny, because the director of the first 3 episodes, they've directed things like The Spanish Princess, but then it turned kind of weird because they also directed episodes of Upload and Young Rock, 2 complete comedies, and it seems like with The Veil, at least with the subject matter that it's covering, it shouldn't try and go the comedic route. However, it does.
The third episode is the least amount of comedy in the whole thing. Like, I was laughing at the sex scene because I just found the purpose of it unnecessary. But overall, I think you're supposed to start getting into the drama at this point. It feels like Adila is of two minds, or at least that's how Imogen sees it, where half of her wants to keep this plan in place and kill Americans, while Imogen is actually getting to her, and she actually wants to protect her daughter and just escape with her.
But it's almost like a road trip comedy, at least for the first two episodes, right?
By the third episode, they're kind of settled in France. And now Imogen is saying, you have to let your daughter go for now while I get you out of town. Otherwise, you're going to be tortured by all these agencies. But they've kind of hinted at the fact that both of them know that Adila is actually this Jinn of Al-Raqqa, which is the main evil lady. I still don't understand why we're supposed to see her as a redeemable character, though.
Yeah, who's the villain exactly in this series?
Well, it would probably be the people who are about to bomb the U.S.
But there's not like a main villain that they have?
ISIS is the main villain.
I understand that, but it just seems like the show isn't really focusing on that.
They have several others, so they're making it kind of complex because the person I was talking about, that her father figure, right?
Right, yeah.
Because we keep getting these backflashes for Imogen, where her dad would like teach her about Shakespeare, or pseudo dad. I'm not sure if it was her actual father. Would also teach her about chess and stuff like that. And then that guy was killed by the CIA, but she doesn't know why. So Imogen is pushing on Max, one of the Americans who's leading up that part of the investigation, who we only learn that they know each other at the end of the third episode. He's just one of the people in charge, to look into why her father was murdered.
Wait, she's just now getting to that?
Yeah, I think that part of it was brought up when they met at the graveyard, Imogen and Adila, because Adila pulls out a gun there and says, you better tell me the truth about what you're doing and why you're helping me. This is my grandfather's grave. He did a revolution, and that's why I hid this gun here. And that's when Imogen came clean about her past and that she thinks that the CIA may have murdered her dad. That
When you say
convoluted.
convoluted, it doesn't seem like there's really any connection between the scenes.
There's
at
also
all.
like really dumb decisions, like everybody's smoking all the time, and if anybody tells them off for smoking, I get it's a European thing, but it's just so in your face. I feel like they're doing it to piss you off, because if anybody corrects them and it's like, hey, you can't smoke here, they're just like, fuck you. That's happened every episode in one way or another. Yeah, it is rude. I totally give the series a 3 out of 10.
A 3 out of 10.
Yes.
Well, I asked earlier about the action because I wanted to know. Even Elisabeth Moss got hurt on one of her stunts, and they couldn't do any stunts for 6 weeks. She came back to work the next day, but she couldn't do anything physical.
I don't think she had any action scenes in the last episode. In the second episode, when was the thing?
It was the second episode.
Okay.
I think a rooftop fight scene.
She like mashes something against someone's face, and then she's pushed against it. It's nothing cool. It's nothing that you'd see in Daredevil, or she wasn't doing flips or anything. I think Elisabeth Moss is close to 40.
Around there, but I was hoping that the creator of Peaky Blinders, who does have action scenes, would actually at least give you something.
So you've seen all of Peaky Blinders,
Yeah,
right?
6 seasons.
And the main character's name was
Thomas Shelby.
And Thomas Shelby, I don't think I've ever seen the Oppenheimer dude like do flips. And Cillian Murphy I don't think he does that many stunt scenes, does he?
No, but there was a lot of like shootouts and explosions and different things in Peaky Blinders.
Yeah, with old guns and stuff.
Yeah.
And so when we're at the cemetery scene in this third episode, when she pulls out an old gun, I wonder if it's just one of the prop sets from Peaky Blinders. Yeah, I don't see this Stephen Knight dude as being like the most Michael Bay-ish when it comes to explosions and stuff and fight scenes. I think it's more about the mental warfare. And it felt like Imogen is just a character that I'm not really that fond of. Kind of like the special ops main character. Her decision making doesn't make sense, and she's also just too much of a wild card that I don't think in reality we would ever entrust so much privileged information to them. Also, the American guy and the French guy who are working together and kind of have a buddy-buddy thing going, where they hate each other right now. They've had so many public instances in airports and outside of streets where they're yelling about secured information for a terrorist threat that's about to happen, and it just seems like there's.
You would want to maybe keep that covered.
That's the comedy you were talking about earlier. It just feels so misplaced and not realistic.
I know that the show, after the first 2 episodes, it had a 56%, but even now, after the third episode, it has a 48% critic score, 54% audience score. I think people are kind of in line with you. Even the IMDb score has been dropping and has a 6.4.
And when it first was announced, it had high expectations, right?
Yeah. I mean, you had the guy who's directed Peaky Blinders, and you have Elisabeth Moss, 2 people who have shown that they can actually make shows. But even things like Pace Magazine gave the series only like a 6.5 out of 10. They still labeled their rating a rotten, and they said it was well acted and directed with some clever moments. But even then, it doesn't really have that many. There's nothing new or fresh about the story.
Giving it a 3 out of 10, I know that's pretty damning on its own. It's not as bad as Hijack, but they do suffer the same situation.
Well, Hijack, you gave it 2 out of 10.
Just stop siding with the villain. If the main character doesn't side with the villain, then I'd be much more receptive to what they're saying.
Yeah, so that's
it's just extra grading. Yeah.
What is the goal of Imogen's character at this
Get
point?
close enough to Adila or the Jinn, who is supposed to have like many different sides to her face. They talk more about the Jinn and the many sides that they have than they actually show the character. I'm not calling the lady a bad actress, but they're not giving her enough to do to play the villain as well as the good guy. It's just kind of her being shady. Also, the amount of times that random terrorists come up to them while they're together, like while they're playing chess or while they're at a bar, and just hand her information almost in front of Imogen is so annoying. But what was your question again?
Well, it's more that I think that they're trying to cash in on the friendship angle, because you even had Elisabeth Moss and Yumna Marwin when the show was first coming out doing those lie detector tests, and it seems like that was the heart of what the series.
But you asked what her main goal is, and Imogen is like, if I get close enough to this lady, she'll spill her secrets, and then we'll be able to stop any threat. But I don't think this lady knows, besides this big threat, what else is going to happen. And like I said, had they just killed her in the first episode, then none of this would have gone down. Or at least they would have had to have redone a lot of work. And instead of it feeling like every episode is moving forward, it does feel like we're facing the same questions that we did in the first episode, as of like, when is the main two characters just going to be completely honest with each other? And then when that happens, besides stopping the threat, what else is there to do? That's why this is a limited series. I don't see it going on.
Steve and I did say that the second season there was a door left open for it. You'll probably agree most with the San Francisco Chronicle that said that Elisabeth Moss is at her best while playing kind of the outrageous character, the Invisible Man and the Handmaid's Tale, but they called this series flat.
I would call it flat, but I would say that she is going out to try to be crazy in this in a different way. Again, there was no reason for her to stand up in the middle of a restaurant or be as smug as she is. I feel like Claire Danes does a great job in Homeland, even in the bad seasons, of kind of showing how you can get close to a terrorist, sleeping with them without actually siding with them. Although in the first season, that was sort of the big deal. So I can see why this show was picked up and why the idea of it is cool. It's just that the implementation and the writing here, it's nowhere close to as finessed as Claire Danes is able to do with her bipolarism. It just feels like this lady wants to be House, and instead she's coming off like Lucille Bluth
from Arrested Development.
Yeah, from Arrested, where she's just like so full of herself.
The last question I had was, why is it called The Veil? What's the connection?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of symbolism behind it. Why do you think it's called The Veil?
Well, I would think it's because Elisabeth Moss is trying to get close to the
She never
ISIS
wears
person.
a veil.
No, but the veil in terms of kind of like identity or anything
yeah.
like
So
that.
Imogen's not a real name. I think Violet is. Just like with Adilla, her real name isn't Adilla. I don't think it's. They're not sure what her real persona is. That's kind of the point of that. And I guess because they're dealing in a world of secret agents, that for instance, we didn't know that Max and Imogen knew each other until the end, so we don't know where her allegiance actually lies, besides that she's a British agent.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's kind of left in the open. Anything else that you learned while you were doing research for the series?
No, that's about it.
There's other characters that we haven't really talked about. Like there's a guy underneath the French, I don't know if it's the French embassy or just the French government, who kind of is there just to give information to Malik, who is the French guy who's running that investigation. But he does absolute jack shit in the third episode. Like they show cuts of him, but he's doing nothing. They keep talking about how this investigation is like so widespread, but we only ever see like the independent Max and Malik in a random scene, and we don't get a full idea of what the problem is.
Well,
or who's approaching
it is weird that they would say that something is expanding, yet whenever you kind of place your series in anywhere cold, it's supposed to be isolated.
Like, so Malik puts two trackers, I think, on Imogen, and Imogen immediately takes them and just throws them off. Like, she knows exactly where they are. But it does feel like, realistically, all they would have to do in France is kind of a person of interest thing, use the camera footage to see exactly where she goes, because she, I think, meets Adilla at Jim Morrison's grave, and it feels like that's a public enough area where they would have been able to get eyes on her, and if they truly wanted to just put her in a room and talk to her, that they could have at that point. Instead, they just keep on allowing her to walk around Paris and France doing whatever she wants. So anything else that I watched 3 episodes to give it its full chance.
Well, again, those are the 3 episodes that were directed by Dana Reed, because the last 3 episodes are directed by Damon Thomas.
I don't think they could do anything in the last 3 episodes to fix it. I think they're too far gone at this point. If it's an episode, yes, 1 episode is a throwaway, especially if it's a pilot. 2 episodes, you're getting pretty far down there, and that's where I was at like a 3.5 out of 10. By the 3rd episode here, though, it's pretty. I'm like 100% sure I'm going to dislike this show regardless.
The Rotten Tomatoes score is also set in stone. When you're at a 48%, 3 episodes in, halfway through the series, I don't think it's really going to change that
I'm going to
much.
look at my pros here to see if there's anything else I can talk about, just to give a positive note on our way out, right? So cool. It looks like Everest, those scenes in the mountains. The kidnapping scene was one of the few interesting parts. In the 2nd episode, they were trying to confirm the identity of whether or not Adila was a terrorist or the jinn. And so they kidnapped her daughter for like 2 seconds, pulled some hair, and then did a DNA test with the blood from the refugee camp and came away with the fact that she was related to her, which was smart. The Directorate of General for External Security is what they call the French authorities, the DGSE. That's something I learned. And whenever I learn anything in these type of shows, I find it as a pro. And then even though I was complaining about the phone thing, it does mystify me and also entertain me. The fact that like in the first episode, I think they were getting phone call reception and internet within the mountains of like a landscape that was completely desolate. There would be like no cell phone towers. Maybe it's special CIA phones, but again, then Elisabeth Moss is able to completely kill her phone by just dunking it into fish water for like 2 seconds. And I think that like as a CIA or MI6 operative, that's kind of dangerous. If anybody found that phone, was able to resuscitate it,
if it was still
and if it had any information that she didn't want on there. Yeah, so it's just a crazy set of circumstances. But in the last episode, you had a terrorist guy go to the mountains where Adila was being kept, unbury her phone, and it immediately worked. Like it had been frozen for days. The battery would be frozen. It would probably need to thaw out for a while. But no, he gets back to his truck after murdering some of the UN guys, turns that puppy on, and it works like nobody's business.
So it's just the phones work and don't work in the strangest of conditions.
And I don't think Stephen Knight knows what he's doing when it comes to that. Like he just takes 2 seconds to kind of realize.
It makes sense. Peaky Blinders and Taboo, the shows that he's most known for, take place in the past. This takes place in the present. So he just might not know how phones work.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.